Good morning, future civil engineers. I am Melissa, your new instructor for Civil Engineering Orientation. And today I will be discussing to you the Chapter 4 or the current fields and careers in civil engineering. So these are the choices of careers na pwede nyong pagpilian after you pass the board exam. So whether or either you enter the civil engineering field or magtatrabaho na kayo or you will continue your educational improvement by enrolling in the master's degree. So the following will be your guide in the future. So the first career is the construction and management engineering. These civil engineers oversee a building project from start to finish, and they coordinate all the different professionals involved in such a project, including architects, builders, electricians, plumbers, and financiers. So basically, they are the key players in the successful completion of a project. And this is the most common field that the civil engineer focuses on. Bali, sila yung present from the start to finish ng project, from the groundbreaking to the testing and commissioning, and even to the turnover of the project. Since they are present from start to finish nga, they are much involved with other professionals in the field like the electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, architects, and so on. Much of construction management involves keeping risk to a minimum by focusing on safety and compliance with national building codes. So they ensure that the workplace will be done and executed in accordance to the good engineering practice. So ano ba yung good engineering practice? Yun nga, there is a compliance with the national building codes, there is safety in the workplace, and they ensure that every workers, from the skilled to the laborer, are safe in the workplace. A major field of civil engineering is construction management. Civil engineers engaged in this capacity are contracted by the builder or developer to essentially time manage the project. So time manage the project. So they are the one to ensure that the schedule will be followed in accordance to the contract. So bago naman magsimula yung construction phase, there is a scheduling na ginagawa. So for example, this week, the delivery of the steel bars, and then next week is the fabrication of the column and the beams, and the other weeks is the concrete pouring. So every step may schedule yan, so they ensure na nasusunod lahat yon. So if there is a delay, he must be the one to do the report. Is there any weather disturbances? Is there a delay of procurement? And so on. So since siya yung nakatutok on that project, a construction and management engineer must have the knowledge yung sinasabi nilang 3 Qs. What are the 3 Qs? First is the quantity surveying. So an engineer must know the basic estimation. Next is the QA and QC, the quality assurance and the quality control. Since siya yung nagli-lead on that project, although meron naman talang specific person to do the QA and QC and also with the QS, as the project manager, he must have the background on these aspects ng engineering. So So this job requires strong leadership and interpersonal skills and attention to details. Yun nga, since you are the one leading the project, you must know how to communicate with the workers and with the other professionals. This involves specialized knowledge of all trades involved and planning for contingencies such as weather. This is a demanding job and requires an ability to work under pressure. When a large development falls behind a schedule, many millions of money can be at stake, which can create a high-pressure environment to work with. So, some common specialties that you can focus on in this career is the construction of residential houses or commercial buildings if you're a civil engineer. O kung electrical engineer ka naman, the electrical system design. If you're a mechanical engineer, HVAC or yung heat, ventilation, and air conditioning. And also the supervision of the construction of highways and heavy construction. Ito nga yung pinaka-common na ginagawa ng isang civil engineer or pinaka-common na ni-specialize niya. So sila yung nakikita nyo on site, leading the project, managing the project, and so on. So next career is the environmental and energy engineering. This specialty focuses specifically on creating projects that sustain or improve the environment in which they exist. Many advances have been made in sustainability in recent years, including the use of alternative energy sources like solar, wind, water, better insulation to reduce energy usage, and plumbing fixtures that use less water, among other methods. So environmental engineers may also position buildings in more sustainable ways to take advantage of natural lighting or solar energy collection, for example. So an environmental and energy engineer is the one in charge in the sustainable design for the control and protection of the environment and its resources. So they are the one extracting and converting the available resources into energy. And since our world is experiencing a constant change or constant development, unlike before that there are many trees, for example, an engineer must ensure the stability between the ecosystem and the continuous development of our environment. For example of this one, by the means of the green technologies na tinatawag, which includes the construction of wind farms, solar power plants, and any other alternative energy sources. So an environmental and energy engineer, as the name would suggest, environmental engineers are concerned with developing ways to prevent pollution of the natural environment and with remediating areas that have already been polluted by industrial activity or mining. And environmental engineering also encompasses aspects of urban planning as well as the health and safety of indoor environments. Environmental engineers are typically employed by private consulting firms and governmental regulatory agencies. So, for example, there is a construction of large industrial building that manufactures or even uses chemicals or manufactures electronic devices. So, an engineer design the system for the wastewater treatment and how they will improve the water quality on that area without damaging the environment. I've read a recent study or recent project from Israel, and these engineers are really smart because they are able to convert the water vapor into potable water or drinkable. Naiinom siya. This study was conducted in Israel, and this is a good example being an environmental and energy engineer because they are able to convert the available sources into a very important needs ng tao, which is the water. So an environmental and energy engineer has also sub-disciplines. Hindi lang civil engineers ang nagiging environmental and energy engineer. Also, chemical engineers, mechanical engineers, and electrical engineers. So you can work with them in the future in this field. And the next career is the geotechnical engineering. The stability of the soil and rock on which a project is built, as well as its chemical composition, are the main considerations of the geotechnical engineering specialty. Softer ground requires different building methods than harder ground or rock, and geotechnical engineers can prevent foundations from crumbling or damaging erosion occurring from runoff patterns on a building project's land. So here, process of understanding the soil and the rock or even underground water and site conditions are being applied. An example, different locations has different soil composition. So for example, yung building mo is located near the sea or mountainous area, or near the creek, or there's a liquefaction on the existing land area. So kailangan ng geotechnical engineer to study the soil composition. So a geotechnical engineers specialized in soil and geotechnical engineering are responsible for foundation design, slope stabilization, soil mechanics, and this discipline also encompasses mining engineering. So if you are a geotechnical engineer, you're able to work mostly with structural engineers. For example, a 3-story building, kailangan niya ng design, at bago ma-achieve or bago maka-design si structural engineer, he needs the soil bearing capacity. So the geotechnical engineer will work on the soil composition to ensure that the design footing of the structural engineer can withstand the loads of the building, and also deals with geological hazards like landslide, soil erosion, and extreme conditions like earthquake. And this discipline also encompasses mining engineering, and we all know that mining engineering focuses on the exploration of the minerals below the ground. Also, if there is a proposed tunnel, so a mining engineering na i-involve siya together with the geotechnical engineers. So these engineers in this specialization are typically employed by large construction firms, private consultants, and mining and petroleum companies. So if there's an oil exploration, a geotechnical engineer can work with petroleum engineers or ocean engineers. And they work, or they mostly spend their time in the field and laboratory. So after field test, they do the laboratory works and research and determines issues on erosion, settlement, and slope. So the fourth career is the structural engineering. Structural engineers need to ensure that buildings or other structures can support their own weight as well as the weight of those who will be using them. By calculating the load that the structure is likely to encounter, structural engineers help to determine which building materials are used and how the skeleton of the structure is assembled. So structural engineers also works with geotechnical engineers, as I've discussed earlier, because they ensure that the design of the footing can withstand the loads of the building. So they also design the construction and repair of different types of structures. For example, they want to preserve a century-old building, or they want to use a century-old building. Structural engineers conduct a non-destructive exploration. In non-destructive exploration, this is the use of equipment to detect or to locate, for example, the reinforcements, the numbers of bars, and so on. So they are the one in charge in the design of the retrofittings. So structural engineers are primarily concerned with designing and constructing buildings and structures that are safe and capable of withstanding the elements to which they will be exposed, improving the structural integrity of the existing buildings. They also act as the consultants to architects and contractors. They offer expert advice on technical problems. So they initially lay out the structural elements of the architect's design and calculate loads such as wind, snow, and earthquake. A structural engineer must have the idea or a basic knowledge on the structural software like ETABS, STAAD, or TECLA softwares, which you will be encountering when you were, I think, in the last year of this course. So they often work in offices and do site visits oftentimes. So if you're a civil engineer and they want you to design a high-rise building, you need to consult a structural engineer that mainly focuses sa proper design ng structural elements. And to be able to achieve those one, they are using softwares. Kasi if a high-rise building is composed of more or less 30 floor levels, so a manual computation, medyo mahihirapan sila sa manual computation. So they have the basic knowledge on the structural softwares. The fifth career is the transportation engineering. Transportation engineers build systems that are used by people in traveling to work, home, or on vacation, among other destinations like railways, subways, roads, and bridges. Safety and capacity are major considerations of transportation engineers. It doesn't do much good to build transportation systems that are not safe or cannot meet the transportation needs of those who are intended to use them. So if you are a transportation engineer, you must consider the traffic, the population, and any other factors to determine the need for a new form of transportation, such as train, buses, and subways. So they can also specialize as traffic engineers or railroad engineers. And transportation engineers mostly work on governmental projects. Transportation engineers design and maintain roadways and public transportation systems, improve traffic flow patterns, alleviate traffic congestion, and prevent vehicle accidents. So example, if there is a proposed construction of a bypass roads, they must consider or conduct a travel demand of that certain place. Yung travel demand na to will determine how often times will it be used, the consideration at the time of travel, and they mostly work with urban planners. So in designing roadways naman, it's not as easy as you imagine, because you must ensure that the design can prevent vehicle accidents, like the design of curbs, banks, and also the location of the traffic signages. You need to consider all of those. And the last one is the water resources, or the hydraulic engineering. Hydraulics is a branch of civil engineering that deals with the flow of liquids through pipes and open channels such as drainage ditches or canals. Hydraulic engineering is a related field that deals with the flow of water over land and in rivers and streams. Design of storm water retention and detention structures and dams are associated with hydraulic engineering. Hydraulic engineers are employed by pipeline companies, private consultants, and governmental agencies. So they are the one in charge in developing new systems or processes for both private and governmental entities that will preserve the fresh water. So for example, proposed hydropower plant. You need to consider the available volume of water or the flow rate it can accommodate, because a hydropower plant facilities start with the construction of dams, with the pipelines, siphons, and even up to the design of the powerhouse. And it all depends on the flow rate of the water source. So nakadepende yung design ng mga pipeline sa volume ng water from the source. So in conducting or in constructing a hydropower plant, we first conduct a feasibility study. That's why it takes a longer period of time bago makapag-construct sila ng hydropower plant. They work mostly on private-public project partnerships. And a water resource or hydraulic engineering can be in demand in the near future, because as the time goes by, the source of water is being limited. So water resource engineer or hydraulic engineers ensures that there must be an adequate water source in the near future. So maybe about 10 to 20 years from now, magiging in demand talaga tong water resource or hydraulic engineer. So in summary, every career has its distinct line of work. So whether you choose to be a construction manager, a geotechnical engineer, hydraulics engineer, structural engineer, and so on, you will always have the chance to work with each other or with other professions. So an example, a proposed bridge will be constructed between two nearby cities separated by a river. So first, there will be a feasibility study on the travel demand conducted by the transportation engineer. After it is proved, a geotechnical engineer will study the geotechnical behavior of the river, and after exploration and lab works, a structural engineer will now be able to design the size of the pileworks and the foundations. And After that, on the start or upon the ongoing construction, a construction engineer will supervise the projects and so on. So, hindi ka lang magpo-focus talaga sa isang field ng civil engineering. And in addition with this field or career that you may focus on the future is also entering the academy just like us. So you can teach students, share your knowledge about civil engineering with those who aspire to become a civil engineer in the near future. So in pursuing this career, you need first to finish the course, of course, pass your board exam, and decide where or what field you are interested to. So it will take time to choose your specialization in the future. So, and I'm sure initially as you go on this, you will take up the different subjects. Yan. May encounter niyo yung Geotechnical Engineering 1, Geotechnical Engineering 2, magkakaroon kayo ng mga design subjects, transportation, or traffic engineering subjects. And as you go on those subjects, you will notice on what subject you will be interested in, and initially magkakaroon na kayo ng idea kung anong ipapursue nyo on the near future. And thank you for listening. So I hope you learned on this chapter.